Everyone, if you could all take your seats, we're about to get started. Welcome to all of you. We're delighted to see all of you here on this beautiful day. And thank you so much for joining us. We're here for a double feature, two back-to-back panels. The first of which is Inclusive Cities, which will be from 2 to 3:15. After that, we will have Providing Healthcare, which is from 3:30 to 4:45. In between, just in case you get a little too fidgety, we'll have a brief 15-minute break. There'll be refreshments available during the break in the reception area just outside of the room. Both of the sessions this afternoon are on the record. We will be live streaming them. We very much encourage you to tweet at Chicago Forum, hashtag Global Cities 2015. But just a reminder to please turn off the volume on your cell phone so we don't get any unexpected little chirps and tweets and who know what's. I'll come back at the end of this session at 3:15. But in the meantime, I wanted to welcome George Martine. He's the technical director of Dhemos Consulting and the co-founder and member of the board of the Brazilian Population Association. He'll be giving our flash talk. He'll be directly followed by the Inclusive Cities session, which will be moderated by Tony Barber, the Europe editor of the Financial Times. So with all of the housekeeping out of the way, welcome to George Martine.
Thank you. Could we get it started, please? I actually have very little time, so I'll just skip the niceties and get right to the point. I'll be dealing with what Secretary Paulson yesterday called the enormous challenge of future growth. My objective is to stress that we need to prepare urgently for this growth, because right now we're only seeing the tip of urban exclusion. And my message is that urban growth concentration is coming, it's good, but it'll have to change the policies if we want to reduce exclusion, and we'll need a positive approach. Because right now, we're sitting at the peak of urban growth in world history. This is the third column now. We're adding on 1.4 million new people every week. That's like a Kansas City or Stockholm every week. And as you can see from the growing orange lines, 90% of that growth will occur in developing regions. And most of that will be in Asia and Africa. We can expect an increase of 2.5 billion more urbanites by mid-century, and already 7 of the 10 largest cities are in developing regions. This proportion will increase, as will increase the global cities in developing regions. So, massive growth is imminent. Will it result in positive and productive inclusion, or will it mean massive slums and poverty? And that depends basically on one thing: whether policymakers dump their current anti-urban stances in favor of proactive measures. If we look at the composition of current cities in developing countries, we note that the largest social group everywhere is made up of poor people. The poor make up from 1/4 to 2/3 of all urbanites. Now, it's interesting that these people are coming to the cities despite the fact that 80% of the developing countries are actually trying to stop them from coming. Such anti-urban policies don't work because people vote with their feet. They come anyways because they're aware of the urban advantages. But these anti-urban stances do make matters worse, and they favor the growth of slums, and that's exclusion. Without support, poor people in urban areas fall through the cracks of the land and housing markets. They're forced to settle on land that is too steep, too distant, or too dangerous. And since they're the largest group in city growth, then this process triggers a series of negative effects in the vicious circle that you can see here, and these ultimately prevent the city from pursuing development. So my point is, we obviously need a new roadmap. Now, where to get it? From the developed countries, that wouldn't work because what is going on is much quicker and much larger. I would suggest we start from the Latin American experience. Latin America, for one thing, has had a much earlier urban transition, so we can identify what has happened, and we can identify also the fact that it has made a lot of mistakes that Africa and Asia are now repeating, and that is what everybody has to be seen. Not everybody is aware of the differences between developing regions. You see, actually, Latin America is was in 1960 at the same stage of urbanization as Africa and Asia are today. So huge differences, and it also means that Africa and Asia are in for a huge urban transformation. They need to learn what went wrong. So what went wrong in the Latin American transition? Policy failures and market glitches in land and housing particularly led to a variety of social and environmental problems. More specifically, anti-urban stances and land speculation has prevented proactive measures to inevitable growth. And what are some of the results of this? Well, you can see them here. There's massive growth of slums. There's gridlock and long journeys to work, which hinder economic growth. There's increased vulnerability to more intensive natural disasters. There have been heavy water shortages, particularly in recent times. And finally, there's many manifestations of social disorganization, drug use, drug traffic, corruption, and violence, and so on and so forth. These are just some of the examples of some of the things that went wrong. Now, can inclusion be promoted? Definitely, but it can't depend on the markets. It depends on political will. We have to accept that urban growth is inevitable. We have to plan for land use and spatial expansion, for basic services, and we have to promote public transport. Private transport is definitely a killer. And we have to aggressively tackle the shelter needs of the poor. In short, inclusive and global cities in the developing world will require better governance, one that goes beyond current needs, and this requires a long-range vision for the future. Because what we see now is just the tip of the urban exclusion. The problems being faced by Latin American countries will be multiplied many times over in Africa and Asia unless we do take this proactive stance. And this needs to be adopted urgently. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed everything with the proceedings so far today, found them stimulating, productive, enjoyable. Global cities attract people of all descriptions from all over the world. Yes, from the seat. And the impact of what I'm about to say will be even more incisive from the seat, I'm told. So, the types of people, they come from different backgrounds, ages, qualifications, not least they differ in their expectations of what they want out of the city they arrive in. They can include people with high skills, people without skills, families, individuals, people of all descriptions. So all this raises the question of inclusivity, and that's what today's panel discussion is going to take a look at. The aim ought to be, in principle, to encourage a culture of inclusion so that populations are free from discrimination on age, gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disabilities, sexuality, or special needs. So to run through these issues, we're very fortunate to have a group of experts with us this afternoon, starting with, on my immediate left, the founder and president of Sister Cities Africa, Boubker Mazoz. Next to Boubker, we have Ratna Omidvar, the executive director of Global Diversity Exchange at Ryerson University in Toronto. Then we have an empty chair, which is not meant to symbolize exclusivity. It is, in fact, going to be filled by the US Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, very shortly. To the left of that empty space, we have Kasim Reed, Mayor of Atlanta. And then finally, on the far left, although you mustn't read anything political into that, we have Salomón Chertorivski, the Secretary of Economic Development in the Federal District, Mexico City. So that's who we have to talk us through these things. Now, I'm going to start, if I may, with Ms. Omidvar. And I'd like to ask you how, in your role at the Global Diversity Exchange, you're ensuring that immigrants and visible minorities do have some kind of voice in city affairs, including city politics.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to visit this beautiful city. I think Chicago and Toronto are sister cities, I think, but I've never had the opportunity to come here, surprisingly. So I'm delighted to be here. I think we have to recognize that the great urbanization of the world has been driven by migration, whether it's regional migration or international migration. In terms of immigration, most immigrants will choose to settle, mostly in urban and suburban areas for various reasons. They come for opportunity, for work, for education, for renewal. Many come for love. But whatever they come for, it is in cities that they will find the greatest opportunities. There is an author called Cofounder who talks about arrival cities, places like Toronto, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, as the places where the great migration movements of the world will create the new middle classes that will lift the cities to prosperity. And because cities are more like each other than they are unlike each other, the Global Diversity Exchange focuses on finding and amplifying what works in one city to ensure that it can travel, in fact, with some ease and some replication and adaptation to others. So to your question, I think there are many ways that different cities in different parts of the world that are cities of migration are deploying instruments, whether they are policy or program, to ensure that immigrants have political and civic voice. And I'll give you a few examples, but starting off with electoral arrangements. Who gets to vote is one of the most important expressions of civic voice. So Dublin, Rotterdam, and other cities in Europe enable residents of their city who are not yet citizens to vote in local elections, because after all, local elections are about uniquely local matters like schools, like lighting, like streets, like garbage removal. You don't have to be a citizen to have a say in these matters. Other cities, such as New York, are issuing driver's licenses to undocumented residents, and this idea is finding some traction in other parts of the world, including Chicago. Chicago itself has been a leader in this field because since 1988, residents, regardless of whether they are citizen or non-citizen, have been voting for their school trustees in local school elections. The city I come from does not, by the way, allow non-citizens to vote in local elections, but it does allow non-citizens to take their place on municipal agencies, boards, and commissions, which for many people are the first step. Their place around these water boards or hydro boards or exhibition place or convention centers as citizens is the first step in their politicization. And this is a very important aspect of political voice. And in Canada, we have launched an initiative called Diversity on Board, which enables people who live in the cities, who are minorities, to sit on agencies, boards, and commissions. And since it was launched a few years ago, we have made close to 730 appointments, closing the gap between lived experience and privilege on boards. Moving down the ladder further, some cities use participatory budgeting as a mechanism of giving voice and control over budgets. So the Toronto Housing Authority, which is the largest landlord in North America, allows residents pride of place in deciding how they will spend capital dollars. Not all of them, but a small portion of them, but that adds up to $53 million a year. The city of Boston has emulated this idea by handing over $1 million in youth capital budgets to the youth and teens of the city. And finally, to political participation. Who runs, who gets access to power around city council is incredibly important. And this depends again on electoral arrangements. The city I come from, it is incredibly hard. I know Canada has a story of exceptionalism. In local politics, we fall down. It is because we have no party politics. Parties are not allowed at the local level, and power of incumbency and family dynasties dominate. So instead, we have launched training programs for immigrants to take their place, taking our lead from initiatives such as the ones that run in the United States. In Hamburg, which is a city-state, so slightly different, the mayor of Hamburg sends a personal letter to every resident who is qualified for citizenship, so encouraging them to become citizens. So there are many examples to your questions, but in closing, I will say that it is not just a matter of individual participation and individual capacity, but also the parallel road of institutional and systems change that will get us from one place to another.
Okay, well, if we could try and get a Mexican perspective on this now. Salomón Chertorivski, as some in the audience may know, you served as health minister in the national government previous to taking over your current role for economic development for the capital area. So what policies have you seen that have spurred inclusive development and in particular urban planning, housing policy? What role has that played?
Thank you very much. First, I really need to do a clarification, because if not, I won't feel okay with myself. Yesterday in the inaugural session, Mr. Hank Paulson, he talked about some Latin American cities, and it was obvious that he doesn't know the Latin American cities, at least for me, because he talked about the failure because of criminal rates in Mexico City. I just want to say that criminal rates in Mexico City are lower than in Washington, D.C. But I'm not going to be politically incorrect, but those are not failing or failure cities, and you have to visit Mexico City. Well, after that clarification, let me start by saying that in my experience, policy that promotes social inclusion, social welfare, are policies that need to be there because of fairness, because of welfare, because of justice, because of a right, but also because they are the pillar for economic growth and economic development. For many times, we have seen that first we grow, and then there's going to be money enough to give everyone. I truly believe that we have to set a minimum standard, a basic land for everyone, and with that, we can propose economic development. People need to have a minimum set, a package of things, and we have to develop the policy in order to do that. If people do not have health services, if they don't have a good education, if they don't feel secure that when they are going to retire, they're gonna have the possibility of living with dignity, if when they are unemployed, they don't have an insurance, if they don't have a decent housing, everything else, it's really impossible. So the first things that a government have to set down, and many of these policies comes from the federal level in many countries, at least in Mexico. But the local governments can accompany and can put what the federal government is not doing. For example, in the case of Mexico, health system was really important for all. In Mexico, health is a right. Today in Mexico, we have universal health coverage. That is, every Mexican has a financial mechanism for protecting their health. I had the opportunity to implement the system in which 57 million people that did not have a possibility for financing their health, now they have them. And let me tell you that that was tremendously important for economic terms, right? Because there were many households that were using or spending around 30% of their income in health needs, and now they have that money to spur it and to make the economy growth. But there are other things that federal governments do not do, and that's a responsibility for local governments. For example, in the case of Mexico, we don't have a federal unemployment insurance. So we decided in Mexico City to complement the basic packages with an unemployment insurance. So now, and when you have your social policy right, then you need to think on the next level, because social policy is crucial, it's vital, it's a right, and it's also the basis for development. But there comes a moment in which the best social policy is economic policy. There comes a moment when you have health, when you have education, you always have and deal with quality problems or whatever, but it comes a moment that what you need is for people to have the opportunity to have a job, to make a decent income, and to have an economic possibility better than what their parents used to have. And I'm going to talk later about economic policy in particular, and specifically about the urban planning question and the housing in a city. Let me tell you that if we should choose one problem in Mexico City, and it's a big city, I mean, it has been the largest urban area in all the continent, in all America, since 500 years ago. But if you want to choose one problem, is that we live in the boundaries of Mexico City, 9 million people. But we do our economic and social life every day in the city, 15 million people. That is, we have 6 million people commuting every day in and out of the city. That is almost 3 times the whole Chicago going in and out of the city. So when you think about mobility, when you think about, well, let's build another subway line or a VTR or whatever, well, our subway already moves 5.5 million people every day. How much more can you build? So when you think about urban planning, the first thing is that it cannot be in hands only of the architects and urbanists. You need to think first on social and economic development. If you put that as a priority, then you rethink the neighborhoods. What happened in Mexico City? Mexico City grew, prices of land in Mexico City start going up. So it was easy, and it was not very well accompanied by national and local policies. People went to live to the suburbs. So instead of densifying and having the economic benefits of economics of scale in a city, we send people outside. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to densify and to have an economic of neighborhood. That is, we're giving fiscal incentives for businesses that hire more than 50% of their people in the nearby area. We exempt the payroll tax. We are investing in public space and in new areas. And we are setting everything so people, and so we start thinking instead of mobility of access. We need walkable cities. We need people that work nearby where they live and that they do their shopping where they live. And that economic model of the neighborhood, I believe, is the economic and social planning for the future. And in huge cities like Mexico City, you can have small cities inside the city. We have to think about the economics of the neighborhood.
Very good. I'd like to welcome Secretary Duncan. Thank you for taking your seat in the middle there. It was feeling very lonely without you. If you're ready to speak now, let's move straight on. Now, it seems almost a truism in some ways to say that education is a very powerful tool for lifting people out of challenging circumstances and transforming communities, but it is true nonetheless. So from your experience in government, what innovative approaches have you seen in the area of education that deliver good results?
First of all, I apologize for being late, and it's great to be back home in Chicago. This is a place I grew up in and very great memories of. So I'll say a couple things. First of all, I'm convinced education is the civil right of our generation, and where we fail to provide high-quality education, we actually perpetuate poverty and social failure. I also think the dividing line today is less, and not everyone agrees with me on this, is less around race and class than it is around educational opportunity. If you give me the poorest child from the toughest community and a tough family, put them in a great early childhood program, put them in a great elementary and middle and high school, put them on track to college, that young person is going to be very successful. But deny them those opportunities, no early childhood, put them in a high school dropout factory, they're not going to have a chance. So the stakes here are extraordinarily high. I'm also increasingly interested not just in cutting edge innovations. For me, the real innovation is how do we scale what works? How do we take to scale what we know is making a difference? And for all the myriad of educational challenges, whether it's the United States or across the globe, people every day are solving them. What we don't do enough is move from pockets of excellence to islands of excellence to systems of excellence. So a couple things that I think are critically important to make sure young people have a chance to be successful. I'll start where I began earlier. High quality early childhood education is a life-transforming opportunity. The United States is behind many industrialized nations. That's not something we should be proud of. For the average child from a poor community, starts kindergarten a year to 14 months behind and very often never catches up. And so trying to go to scale, providing these opportunities for children who needs it, I think is critically important. On the K-12 side, thinking very differently about talent. Great teachers, great principals make a huge difference in children's lives, and not every teacher, not every principal is equally talented. We generally, frankly, have not taken seriously the responsibility to make sure our most needy children in communities, be it inner city urban here in Chicago or in Atlanta, or in a rural community or a Native American reservation, has access to the hardest working, the most successful, the most committed teachers and principals. We have to think very differently about human capital.
Okay.
Secondly, technology is a game changer, and to have children have access to learn anything, anytime, anywhere has to become the norm. We're making some progress there, have a long way to go. Third, on the K-12 side, just the idea of high expectations, having every high school student have a chance to take college-level classes and start to experience that and feel you can be a part of it. And then the final one on the K-12 side for me is really thinking, you touched on it a little bit earlier, is thinking about the whole child. There are so many children who I worked with here and other places that the amount of trauma that they are dealing with is pretty extraordinary. And if our children aren't safe, if they're not fed, if they're living in fear, if they can't see the blackboard, it's hard to talk about calculus and algebra trig and biology and chemistry. So making sure our children's physical and social and emotional needs are being met is for me a baseline, a foundation to think about real academic success. And then finally, just the world has changed, the economy has changed. A high school diploma is important, critically important, but it's insufficient. And making sure that every single young person here has access at least to community college, grades 13 and 14. So Chicago has led the way there. The state of Tennessee has led the way. But for me, the vision, the innovation is that K-12 worked pretty well for the past century, is not enough for the next century, and the vision has to be a pre-K through 14 system at a minimum.
Very good. I'd like to turn now to Mayor Reed and frame the question in these terms. What we've already heard in the last 10 to 15 minutes about education and transportation systems and housing, all these things can be very expensive, and much as the goal of inclusivity is desirable, so is the need to manage a city with a sense of fiscal responsibility. I could say, observing the United States from London, your fame as somebody who holds up the banner of fiscal prudence has crossed the ocean. And, but are these two goals ever incompatible?
I think that really it's a matter of will, and they can't be. And if you're leading a city, you really have to address them. And I actually think that achieving high levels of fiscal performance galvanize the public will to deal with inequality. So in other words, if you don't deliver concrete results around the finances of the city, the pension of the city, trash removal, infrastructure, the budget of the city, the public won't believe you for anything else. So my sense of things is, I talk a lot about our fiscal model and balancing budgets, really so that when I want to recommend making sure that everybody in our government makes a minimum of $10 an hour, nobody rejects it because we've delivered concrete results everywhere else. Right. Or if I want to open every single recreation center and partner with the boys and girls, so we're extending after-school care for children in the city of Atlanta, nobody rejects it because the city has a cash surplus of $145 million, up from $7.4 million when I walk in the door. And so I say all of the time that cities are where hope meets the street. And when you're operating it at your best, the folks that can actually deal with inequality the most are only with you if you're taking care of the basics. Because they won't have confidence in you to invest in these new areas if you can't balance your budget. But on the other hand, if you try and go and start a new initiative or a new program, no matter what it is, but certainly directed at issues around income inequality. We just launched the Welcoming Atlanta initiative where we're focusing on our foreign-born population. Not a lot of folks know it, but we've got the second fastest growing foreign-born population by percentage in the US. Well, we're creating a series of initiatives, standing up an Office of Immigrant Affairs. We're a southern city, so the politics are harder around immigration. The reason I think that people support it is because, Standard & Poor's and Moody's are getting ready to come out with a report affirming our credit rating. So that is the give and take. I call it the politics of the soft and the hard. If you don't get those things right, the people who can stop you, they will. Because when you come with an early education initiative, what do people who have means think? This is another opportunity for the government to reach into my pocket to fund yet another initiative that I don't even believe is going to be transformational. But when we opened every single recreation center in the city of Atlanta, we reduced teen crime by 23%. So I can turn that into a business proposition when I go to see the leading CEOs and NGO leaders as to why this is a real investment. And then they ask for the Boys and Girls Club to partner because that's an entity that's been thoroughly vetted in dealing with concrete results. And so I say over and over that these issues around inequality are primarily matters of will. And then the other example I point out as I close is that, if it wasn't for inclusion, nobody would have even heard of the city of Atlanta. In the 1960s, the city of Birmingham was a steel capital and was more important to the US economy than the city of Atlanta, certainly in the South. But we had a leader named Carl Sanders, and we had a mayor named Ivan Allen who testified in favor of the Civil Rights Act. And then there was a guy named Jimmy Carter who said segregation in the South must end. At about exactly the same time, there was a guy named Bull Connor who was in the homes of America's televisions, standing in the door of progress. And Northern Capital said, we're going to invest in Atlanta. And so now we have a metropolitan economy that's past $300 billion, and it's bigger than the GDP of 33 states. That came out of being inclusive from 1962 today. So I think it's a part of our core, so we're able to work at it. Not perfect, lots of problems, but certainly willing to be at it.
That's a fluently told story. Let's hear from North Africa, I should really say, rather than Africa as a whole, because it's a very, very specific area that you work in with, in your latest phase of your career, extremely marginalized youth at the CD Moment Cultural Center. Tell us something about what you're doing there, and in particular, you use youth mentoring, role models, don't you? I believe to try and have a positive influence on children's lives.
Well, thank you first for inviting me to my second home, because as you know, Casablanca is a sister city to Chicago. And allow me, just to put you in the picture first, to tell you how everything had started. In 2002, I created an association of sister cities, Casablanca, Chicago, to be the counterpart of the sister cities committee in Chicago, to be the interlocutor, and also to create programs and partnership between the two cities. And at that time, we initiated a sister school program between the two cities. And I went actually to some underserved schools in Casablanca, selected some brilliant kids between the age of 15 and 17. And that's how we started, communicating with the exterior world. Because if you know CD Movement, it's the first slums, of Morocco since 2019. It's a city within a city. At that time, they had about 450,000 inhabitants over 47 square kilometers. Today, after the census of September, it reached 700,000 inhabitants. These people immigrated from the rural area to the city. That was, at that time, their El Dorado. Unfortunately, they were forgotten, they were neglected, and they were marginalized. And actually, nobody even knew about their existence until, unfortunately, the incidents and the terrorist attacks of 2003, when 14 suicide bombers exploded themselves in the middle of the city in 5 localities. And it happened that all the 14 suicide bombers came from this neighborhood, CD Movement, that became famous, for terrorism. So one of the schools we got selected was also from this neighborhood. So I took these children or youth and worked with them as a classroom, workshops on leadership, on self-esteem, teamwork, tolerance, how to accept the difference, and how to work with the kids, and prepare them to become leaders in their own communities and participate in the development of their own neighborhoods. That's how it all started. After 2003, we started working all together in underserved neighborhoods, several ones, and the main one was CD Movement. Then I found out that we were not really leaving any positive impact by going to those places, distributing school manuals, bags, toys, when there is a celebration, clothes, medical caravan. There was not a real impact, on those people, because we leave back to our homes and they go back to the same neighborhood with siblings, that are either delinquents or drug addicts or people who have dropped school and they are jobless, and therefore, they are very easily influenced by their community and by their environment. And that's when I talked to the president of the municipality, and I said, well, I want to do something here. And he said, well, you're already doing something and a lot of things in this neighborhood. He said, no, I want to stay with these people, to be with them, to follow them, to know about their immediate daily needs, about their preoccupations, aspiration, their hope, and their expectations. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to create a cultural center. And that's when I was really shocked to learn and to know that in an area where probably more than 400 to 450,000 people lived, they did not have a single cultural center. They had only a very tiny youth center for about 15 associations there. And it was really a big shock for me. So we opened the center in 2006. And who are the people, that I picked, to work in the center? Are youth that we already trained and we already armed with a lot of ammunitions, and that is, the civic education to become leaders in order to work with the kids, at-risk kids, and the juvenile youths of their neighborhoods. So, when you have youth talking to youth, it's much better than adults. They listen to them, they respect them, they look up to them, they try to imitate them, they try to become like them. They are really role models for them. So youth, mentoring youth, seemed, to be very successful, and that's how we attracted a lot of kids from the slums to come there, because the only people they know are their siblings, are their brothers and sisters who have not succeeded in life. So now we have some models, some success stories to show them. First, the youth, they know the area. They know the frustration of the people. They know their problems, they know their aspiration and their hopes. So they know how to deal with them. And the kids, they feel that they're close to them, that there are some people, from the same neighborhood. And after attracting the kids, you cannot believe that the kids, when we don't, in some of the areas there, even before the center opens and after the center, if you close one day, you have some of the kids begin a dirham, 20 cents, in order to call me, and they say, when are you going to open? When you have the kids coming to you and trying to reach you and want to have some education, and they feel that there's something good for them, that they have now hope, that they have an opportunity to become someone else, that's extraordinary. Then we attracted the mothers, because in the beginning, as I was explaining to somebody this afternoon over lunch, first, the kids, when we attracted them in the beginning, of course, we took them to the swimming pool, to a private swimming pool. We did everything that is fun. We did not talk about education. We didn't talk about homework. We did not talk about math. Because if you know, in Morocco, the dropout from schools is so high. We have 30%, of the people that drop out, before reaching the 6th grade. So to talk about education, to them, it's just, asking them to run away and stay home. So that was a lot of fun. And then it was a challenge. And then, okay, you want to have fun, you have to study. You have to bring me, your grades. And the kids, they were making fun of us when we started, recruiting them. Like they are very smart, and we are there, doing what? And for me, I had a problem, because every single person there, especially even the kids, thought that I was running for a political position, because that was the only thing that the associations were doing. They go there, they use this area as a reservoir of votes. So that's why, they kept it the way, it was since the 20s, because they are using these people. They are giving them a lot of promises and hope, and of course bribing them. And when you have these people in poverty and have nothing, they would accept $10 right there immediately, than promises that will never be fulfilled. So that's what they thought in the beginning, until it's second, third year, they say, hey, this guy is not running for elections. So he really meant what he's doing there, and he came, actually to help us. So that's what encouraged the women to come, because the women used to come only in the evening. We start at 5 o'clock, and the women, they come with their children. It's a very dangerous place. I know my friends, here from the sister cities, Casablanca, Chicago, they've been to that place. They have to be escorted. It's very dangerous. So the mothers used to come with the kids, wait for them for 3 hours to 4 hours, and then take them back home. So I created a sewing shop for them, and now we have about 60 women that are working there. They come, put their kids, and go and work we created a cooperative, 2 now, one for food and one for... and the women started asking us, we need some education. We cannot follow our kids. We cannot cope with them. So now we have the mothers, we have the family. It became really a community center where everybody is having the same thing. You were talking about policy. We are starting the policy from the grassroots. We have now people participating in political decision in the municipality of the neighborhood. The people have gained hope again. But we are helping them, to fulfill this hope and to realize, this dream that they had.
That's a very, very compelling story. In about 15 minutes, I'd be opening up the discussion to questions from the floor, but I thought we might try and pursue some of the things that have cropped up already in the panel discussion, and ask another round of questions, but you'll have to try and limit yourselves to about 3 minutes each, if you can. So let me go back to Ratna over here. Well, one of the things that's come through in the discussions since the conference opened is the need to strike a balance between the policies of a national government, the federal government, and a municipal government, and getting the right level of cooperation and so on. Now, how does this play into policies on immigration? You've looked at this, haven't you? How does one get the best, most constructive level of cooperation?
Thank you for that question. It's a really important one, and one that is often either ignored or misunderstood. In many jurisdictions, immigration, because of its national influence, is viewed largely as an issue under national authority. But I would say that in general, and you can cut me off at 3 minutes, I'm happy to stop, but I would just say in general, national governments are in the business of determining who gets into the country or who stays out of the country. Or who becomes a citizen or who doesn't. But it is local governments and local communities that are in the business of developing frameworks for local integration and settlement, which are best delivered locally. Sadly, this difference is often not recognized by national governments, and local governments are often left up to their own resources, to their own imagination to serve the residents as they best see fit. I think it was Jane Jacobs, the famous planner, who said the level of government that is furthest removed from the people is best positioned to provide it with safety and protection, but it is the level of government closest to the people that is best positioned to provide services to it. And this is where local government and immigration really come together. And Mayor Reed, I have heard of Welcoming America, and thank you. That is a local movement that is spreading across the United States and, in fact, globally. I would say that, very quickly, that mayoral leadership plays a huge role in this whole arena. Chicago, for instance, a city that I look to quite often, Mayor Emanuel has publicly said he wants to make Chicago the most immigrant-friendly city in North America. Detroit, as it tries to revitalize itself, its mayor has invited immigrant entrepreneurs and immigrants to come back to Detroit to build its future prosperity. In our city, I know that a certain mayor is famous, or should I say infamous, in the world, but even under his watch, Toronto made significant progress in certain issues. And I'll just give you a few examples where Toronto really does earn that badge of exceptionalism. Our schools, when I first came to Toronto in 1981, my children were in a classroom with many others who looked like them, but the teachers and the principals and the vice principals and the staff all didn't. Well, 25 years later, or more, I should say, 35 years later, sorry, it's a completely different story. Not only do the teachers look like the students, but the curriculum has shifted, and this is, are you cutting me off? Yes, he's cutting me off. Okay, I can tell you wonderful stories about schools, library, parks, zoning. All this to say that cities are where you can have wonderful examples of inclusion, but I will not pretend that cities are saintly. They are not saintly. Inclusion and exclusion live side by side, thrive side by side together. My job at Ryerson and the Global Diversity Exchange is to take these ideas of excellence, as Secretary Duncan has said, and make them into movements and systems of excellence. That's what we do.
Well, Secretary Duncan, I guess I want to put a similar kind of question to you, but in the field of education. we have the federal government, then you have the city governments. What is it possible to make that mix work constructively?
Every day I try and figure out the appropriate federal role, and I have to say before I went to Washington, I led the Chicago Public Schools here, and I was frankly very skeptical of could the federal role be helpful.
Yeah.
And candidly, the bureaucracy didn't help me much when I was here. Worried a lot about compliance and bureaucracy. Wasn't helping me reduce my dropout rate or keep my kids safe or teach my first graders and second graders how to read. And I definitely don't have it figured out, but it's become clearer to me over the past 6.5 years. I think the appropriate role here in a decentralized and a federated system that we have for education in the states, three things. One, the federal role has to focus on equity. We have to make sure that the children historically who have been underserved have a chance, whether that's poor children or English language learners or children with special needs or homeless children. There's a huge role to play there. Secondly, it can't just be about equity, it has to be about excellence. So challenging states and districts and cities to have high standards we think is very important. And the third goes back to your original question, is this idea of innovation and taking to scale what works. And we have not seen a lot of scale at the local level. It's hard for different reasons, and the federal role is perhaps uniquely positioned to help share best practices and let more folks learn what is working. But at the end of the day, the real work is always going to be in the real classrooms, in the cities, in the schools, in the communities. And if I'm not a good partner to the mayor, if I'm not listening to what he needs and the superintendent needs, then I'm part of the problem, not the solutions. Those three themes are where we spend a huge amount of our time, but I have to be a good partner. And the final thing I'll say in terms of how the mix works, we need more elected officials like Mayor Reed, who step up and hold themselves accountable and responsible for improving school systems. And you cannot have a great city unless you have a great public school system. I just think that's impossible. And he's dealt with some very, very challenging things and done it with real courage and real leadership. And we need every mayor, if things aren't improving educationally, I think those mayors candidly should lose their jobs. If things are improving educationally, that should be a vote of confidence, a way to keep your jobs. But mayors have to have huge skin in the game, put their resources, their reputation, their political capital, their financial wherewithal behind kids and trying to build school systems that are truly excellent.
Let me go to the end of the panel here, and Salomón, Chertorivski. We've touched on the importance of helping the disadvantaged, but have we drawn a close enough connection between adopting that policy and actually generating economic development? I mean, there is some evidence in Mexico City that this happens. Mm-hmm. Could you give us some examples of how you've gone about doing that?
Yeah, thank you very much. After being 15 years on social policy, and specifically after 5 years of running the health sector of my country, I was very happy with many results, but I was very frustrated that we have people with life expectancy that grow tremendously. We have more years of schooling, but still we have the same amount of poor people. So I was really frustrated about it. And for me, it's economic policy. And not only that, I understood that I have to go from federal to local to start doing public policy that really impacts in the immediate way to the people. And I found out that the disadvantaged groups really have a barrier which many times is economic. It's not having a job, not having a well-paid job, or an unprotected rights job. And that was the barrier. What you have to do, and what specific examples we have. You have to have investment. And you have to make it easier for businesses around the world to decide and go to invest in the city, because that is the only way to create the well-paid jobs that you need. Mexico City, for example, has 50% of its population is 30 years or less of age. It's a very young city, and we need to create jobs. For example, we are graduating the largest number of engineers a year, 13,000 engineers. So we need to bring investment for them to create jobs. We have an office that facilitates everything, permits, we have fiscal incentives. We know we need broadband low cost, corporate services low cost, R&D low cost. So we have policies really into lowering the costs for businesses to establish. You also have people that want to be entrepreneurs. You need to set the policies right for young people that want to invent, to create, to innovate, to have all the possibilities for them in capability building, in financial services, and in lowering the necessities and the permits. And second, and let me end with this, we need to set the rules of the countries and the cities that we want to be. That is, if we want to live in society, if we want to live in solidar societies, if we want to live in a community, we need to set the rules. And one battle that many cities in the United States are giving, and now Mexico City is giving a huge battle, is on minimum wage. People that work hard need to have a payment that gives them a decent possibility of living. If we want to be cohesion societies, we need to start from there. And in the case of Mexico in particular, the only one enabled to set the minimum wage is the federal government. So we are given a tremendous battle, Major Mancera from Mexico City, in terms of increasing the national minimum wage, because today it's below the poverty line. 7 million people in Mexico that are working full time and receive the minimum wage, they cannot even eat. So we need to give that battle. We need to create solidarity, cities and countries.
Thank you very much. Now, Mayor Reed, we haven't yet really touched on the question of law and order in big cities, but this is a very topical theme, not just in the United States, but around the world, any country that is home to very large cities. So, it fits in closely to this question of building inclusivity. Now, from your experience, you must have seen some things that work, some things that don't work. Could you briefly give us a kind of balance sheet on that?
I think, first of all, you really have to care about making sure that the police that protect your population really do mirror the population. It matters because it affects the attitude when you have engagement. So in the city of Atlanta, for example, the population is about 58% black, and our police force is about 56% black. We also have a police chief who's from Atlanta, which I think makes a huge difference. We're also blessed to have 4 Presidential Medal of Freedom winners who are a part of the civil rights movement. So Congressman John Lewis, Ambassador Andrew Young, Reverend Joseph Laurie, Dr. C.T. Vivian was actually punched in the face in Harris County, Texas. So when we have moments that are hard or controversial, or where someone has engaged in behavior that's questionable, and you have a new generation of young people come to the table, it makes a difference to put them in the room with John Lewis or Ambassador Andrew Young, because they actually did walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And so with regard to policing our communities, the question isn't whether any city in America can have the kind of circumstances that led to Ferguson or Baltimore or New York. The question is, how do you respond at that moment? And so you have to respond, one, with focus and intensity, a high level of transparency, and a path that's going to explain what happened in a transparent manner. And then the other thing that you have to do really is to make sure that you don't throw your police force under a bus based upon the behavior of bad actors. So a Ferguson or a Baltimore or New York can happen in any city, large or small, but we've got to focus on that bad actor. But what are the differences? Using elders in the community with real credibility at the moment that you have a challenge makes a difference. Setting forth a clear path around how we're going to handle a controversial matter so that it's publicly known where we're going makes a difference. Making sure that the women and men who protect the city or community every single day, and 99% of the time that they're right, making sure that they know that they're going to be given a fair hearing makes a difference. Not condemning the people who are rightfully upset about a particular challenge makes a difference. So I really think that that's the portfolio that you approach problems with, not only in large cities, but any of our communities, because it's very important for all of us to know and recognize. There is growing tension in our cities, largely driven by inequality and by a lack of opportunity or a perceived lack of opportunity. And so we're going to be dealing with these kinds of issues going forward, and we need to be prepared to deal with these measures thoughtfully so that we don't have the kind of disruptions that we have been seeing in the U.S.
Secretary Duncan, you wanted to come in there?
Just very, very quickly, because I've spent a decent amount of time in Ferguson after the issues there and in Baltimore the past couple weeks. And again, these aren't unique situations. Just to state the obvious, while there are definite issues we have to work through with the police force and with police training, at the end of the day, we just have far too many young people in far too many of our communities, urban and rural and tribal reservations, where young people are hopeless, where they are totally disconnected from the larger society. And you can fix the police, but if the school systems don't work and there are no jobs and their families are broken and the only folks hiring are the local drug dealers, we are not going to get there. And when you listen to these young people who are unbelievably smart and passionate, intelligent, inspiring, everything in their life is stacked against their success. And we have stood as a society, I would argue, far too passively and watched this divide that the mayor talked about grow. And unless we take this on in a very real and holistic manner, we're going to continue to see these kinds of things and they go way beyond a good cop or a bad cop.
Okay, very good. Now, I'm going to move on to questions at this point, but what I'd like to do is if somebody has a specific question that they could direct at Boubker, then I would like you to have the first opportunity to reply. Otherwise, I think we're just going to be a little bit too short of time, if that's okay. But you can obviously if you've got something you'd like to react to right now, then go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think you're absolutely right. We, the youth today, all over the world, they have a lot of emptiness in their lives. I think they are sort of neglected and marginalized, and I think they are not involved in policy making or in any decisions. I think they feel that they are not benefiting from the development of their cities. And when we talk about city movement, these are people who don't sometimes feel even that they are citizens, of that city. I just want to say that to talk about policies and what I'm suggesting also to the Minister of Housing and Education and Culture is to create centers, even if it's 1 or 2 rooms, in every building they build where they relocate all these slums, inhabitants, to have 2, 3 rooms where they can have a cultural center, they have a community center where these people, can be tutored, can, have civic education. The parents, can follow their kids. They have some activities, and we are, as an association now, we think that we are providing opportunity to this at-risk kids and juvenile youths to learn and to shine and to discover their talents and to become, good citizens. Today, if we leave this empty space and this vacuum, these kids, are easily attracted and trapped by drug dealers, by extremists. In our case, we have Morocco, unfortunately, is now number 2 country providing some suicide bombers, to ISIS. So I just want to take advantage just for one thing to read, if you don't mind, one short paragraph of how the center changed the lives of some people. And I have one example, and I insisted, to say, if you don't mind, with your permission. This is a girl who started with us, when she 8 years ago. Donc, she was like 8 years, and now she's 16 or 17. She's senior in high school, and she said, "Thank you so much for changing my life, my way of thinking, and giving me a chance to change my social situation. Thank you so much for giving me hope again. You should know that my life started only 8 years ago when the center opened. And I only remember that what happened in those years and all that happiness. So thank you so much. You did a lot to me, more than my parents have done, and that's making me embarrassed. Thank you, thank you."
All right, so there are some people with wireless microphones in and around the audience. So who would like to offer a question? If you could just quickly identify yourselves and then make a short, concise question. Thank you. On the far left side there, please.
Okay. I need to be seated. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria de Amezcua. I am from Mexico. I am priista. The fact I want to welcome Arne Duncan, we say in Spanish, you never know what you got until you lost it. And we lost you. And we really miss you. We really miss you, believe me. I just want to clarify, sometimes, because the majority now in the school, most of the system are Hispanics, of course, and blacks. And sometimes the education not been optimal like we expected. So we need to be in charge and to take care, because no is the money, it's the way they confront the children. About Mexico, let me tell you, honestly, I admire what you're trying to do, because there the crime is really big. And the reason is the drugs. So now they are going to authorize the marijuana. It's a lot of things who they are coming and ask, Simon, you want the marijuana to be able to be rich for everybody? So it's a lot of issues which are affecting the children. So I just want to be assured what is happening. And believe me, the thing you see here is like I invite you to my house and I put you in the living room. It's beautiful. But we have another part we call Chirac, which is
Right. We need to have a question, not a statement. Right. Lady in the front row.
Thank you all for your wonderful, inspiring presentations. My question is for Mr. Mazoz. And could you tell us if you have any data on what's happened to the dropout rate just in City Moomin, the school dropout rate? And if not, I have another question, and that would be, how do you generate the resources to provide the vast array of goods and services? I know you have a comprehensive healthcare center as a result of a grant from the Gates Foundation, but I'd be interested in knowing how you deliver all the other goods and services.
Well, I cannot give you exactly the rate of dropouts in City Movement, but in general, it's very high in Morocco. It's about 30%. Last year, according to the official figures, it was about 450,000 people who dropped out from school. These are kids who do not even reach the sixth grade, which is pretty bad, because they become illiterate again, and there's nothing you can do about them. They are not even fit, and they cannot be accepted for vocational institution, unfortunately. But what I can say about the center, we recuperated people who dropped out and came back, and that's a success story. A lot of people we recuperated people who were about to be sentenced, to 3-4 months in prison. We recuperate people, because you have this letter that you sent to the delegate of the Ministry of Education, and they let them, go back under the condition that they do well and you will not fail in a class. And we have those people, with us. So it's something really good. About the funds, we have a lot of partnership. We try to give these kids an opening towards the international world. Today we have practically about 75 international volunteers that come to the center from all over the world. Right now, we have 2 Chinese, 3 Americans, 1 Canadian, from Taiwan, from Germany, etc. These people, there was a barrier between these people, and the rest of the world, and therefore that created, hatred about the other, the unknown. Today, we have this tolerance, and we have these people that they accept, the difference. And we have conventions also with the American Language Center, for instance. They are paying our teachers. We have the French Cultural Center. They are paying 3 teachers. And we have a lot of institutions, companies that actually contribute to the budget of the center.
Very good. Now there is a gentleman in I would say it's the 5th row, right there we are. That's it.
I want to thank the panel for coming here today, and especially Secretary Duncan. As a native Chicagoan, welcome home. But I work for CARE USA, one of the world's largest international development humanitarian aid organizations in Chicago. I work in Chicago. My name is Tom Hanchman. Atlanta is kind of my home away from home. I travel there a lot on business. So my question is for Mayor Reed. Our Flash Talk presenter talked about exclusion and inclusion, talked a lot about transportation. So I spend a lot of time in Atlanta. I love MARTA. It's great for me as a visitor. I spend a lot of time in downtown Atlanta where CARE USA is headquartered. But I wondered if you would speak briefly about your comprehensive plan for Atlanta. I think you guys have done great work there in the last 10 to 20 years. But transportation seems like a big issue, especially if you're driving in a car, and I think it could inhibit people's economic opportunity, especially those in lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
I think that's a fair question, and Michelle Nunn, congratulations to her on taking over CARE. Here's where we are regarding transportation. Atlanta got to be a 6 million person metro probably 20 years faster than demographers projected. And then we had a bit of old vestiges, old thinking that really confined the expansion of MARTA. So in 2014, we had the largest expansion of MARTA in the history of the system. So we expanded and incorporated Clayton County. And then another good thing happened. Our governor and our legislature, which are both overwhelmingly Republican, just voted to invest $900 million annually in transportation and infrastructure investment. And while we only invested about $75 million more in rail and light rail, it was a very big deal because you had a very conservative legislature vote for a pretty significant tax increase in a state in the Deep South against a lot of political opposition. So I take the largest expansion of MARTA in its history in 14 as a good signal of us coming to grips with the problem. I take a Republican governor deciding to raise $900 million more in new revenue as us moving in the right direction. And then third, I think the biggest opportunity around transit and transportation is the fact that the business community is demanding it. And so it's removing the transportation and transit conversation from Democrat, Republican, urban, rural. But if you look at the major business relocations in the city of Atlanta and in our region, businesses located the jobs near MARTA and near transit. So State Farm is building an 8,000 person campus near transit. Mercedes-Benz North America is moving their headquarters from New Jersey. They demanded it be near transit. NCR is building a $300 million headquarters in downtown Atlanta or in Midtown. They demanded it be near transit. I think that that is the best indicator of of how we're going to get this done. Because it won't be somebody from Atlanta demanding it or somebody from another community demanding it. The future of politics is performance. And if you want to be first to the future, you have to have transit access. So right now, we've got the 10th biggest system in America with no state support. And I think because of the jobs war, that's going to tip the scale in favor of faster and faster investment in transit. That's how I think it's going to happen.
Very good. Well, I'm afraid we're coming very, very close to the end right here now. But no panel discussion is complete without a question that has arisen out of the ether on Twitter. And the one I'm looking at says, can each of the panelists very, very quickly just name one city in the world where they think inclusion has been most successful? Let me start with Ratna.
That's a very difficult question to answer. I would say that in terms of local integration, Toronto does well, but in terms of political integration, it fails completely. It gets low marks. Okay. So it's a very complex, nuanced world, but that's my 2-minute soundbite.
Secretary Duncan?
Inclusion broadly or inclusion with people with disabilities?
More broadly.
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
No one's doing it perfectly. On the education side, which I know better, Houston's doing some very, very interesting things.
Okay. Now, we know Atlanta comes top in so many things.
I would lean towards some of the work I've seen done in Toronto and some of the work I've seen done in Minnesota, actually.
That's interesting. Salomón?
We have done some pretty nice job in Mexico City, of course, but we are still far, far away from on equality, and that is the main barrier. But I would say we have to look at Scandinavian cities. Right. I mean, if we want to focus on taking care of inequality and disadvantaged groups, we have to see what Scandinavia has done, because it's terrific.
Okay. And the final word, Boubker.
I would say probably Sweden, but I also add that Casablanca is on the way. It's on the way. We have now the metro that is linking, both sides of the city, and we have a national initiative for human development that is actually giving a chance to people in underserved area to create their own businesses and to be involved in the city development.
That's good to know. Well, you cannot say you haven't been warned or alerted in a positive way. So with that, we're going to close the panel discussion, and I believe it's time for a short break.
It is indeed. Huge thanks to our panel and moderator. As we said, brief 15-minute break. There's some refreshments out here. We'll be back here at 3:30 p.m. sharp. We really like to do things on time here. And we'll start the second half of the double feature at that point.